She awoke with a start, her eyes darting to the digital clock sitting on the nightstand next to her bed. 11:55 p.m. The bright red glow of the segmented numbers read, offering the only source of light in the dark room. She blinked the heavy sleep from her eyes, sitting up slowly. She didn't remember going to bed or even falling asleep. No matter. These things happen sometimes, especially when waking up suddenly. At least it wasn't sleep paralysis this time. Her body shuddered involuntarily at the thought, which she forcefully pushed out of her mind. That was the last thing she needed. Still, a mild jolt of fear shot through her as her eyes darted around the dimly lit room. Wondering for the 1,000th time why she never got a lamp for the nightstand, she pushed her fear away. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. Of course, nothing would grab her feet. That was just silly. She knew the room well, navigating her way to the light switch next to the door, easily avoiding any obstacles that would be in her way. Flicking the light switch, she winced as the light blinded her for a moment. She couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief as the angry orange light banished the darkness, along with her unfounded fears. With her fears subsided, she realized quite suddenly why she'd woken up. The pressure on her bladder was immense, almost painful. Probably that big glass of water she'd drank before going to bed, she thought as she made her way down the hallway to the bathroom. She made a conscious effort to not turn on the hallway light. She wasn't scared. Instead, she used the dim light from her bedroom to see by. Pushing open the bathroom door, she reached in and flicked the light on. She saw herself in the mirror, and she looked away. She didn't like to look at herself at the best of times, and waking up at 11:55 p.m. to pee was by no means the best of times. Frizzled hair and no makeup wasn't the worst of it. After doing her business, which took an annoyingly long time, she stood in front of the mirror, washing her hands. Gazing into her own eyes for a second, seeing her own eyes, she felt something. Her eyes darted away from the gaze. Drying her hands on the nearby towel, she left the bathroom. Standing in the hallway, the dim light from the bedroom barely offered any illumination this far away. She tilted her head, her mind finally awake enough to notice. But no, that was impossible. The hallway wasn't longer. Her bedroom was not further away. She had been simply tired and not quite awake yet before. She convinced herself of this, despite having lived in this house for her whole life and knowing it better than she knew the back of her hand. That part of her knew the hallway was longer, but she ignored it. Such things were impossible. Shaking her head slightly, she rubbed her tongue against the roof of her mouth. She was so thirsty. With a sigh, wondering if she'd ever be able to get back to sleep at this point, she made her way down the hall, in the opposite direction of her bedroom, to the kitchen. At least in this room, the moon finally filtered through the clouds enough that she didn't need to turn on the light. Making her way through the kitchen, she pulled one of her large glasses from the cabinet. It was really more of a big glass beer mug than anything else. Filling it with water from the tap, she looked around the kitchen. The faint shadow of tree limbs on her window caught her attention, fascinating her. The thought crept into her mind that they might be the fingers of some creature. Thoughts of something unknown to humans, sneaking into her house to eat her, flashed through her mind until the chilled water overflowed the mug and onto her hand, bringing her out of her reverie, back to reality. With a small laugh, she shook her head, turning off the tap. Taking a deep drink, she smiled. She was just so glad she had a deep well that always gave her clear, crisp, cold water with just a hint of sweetness. One of the many benefits of having a farmhouse well outside city limits. The refreshing water made her forget her thoughts of strange creatures as she drank the water down quickly. Shrugging, she filled the glass again, simply because the water tasted so good. Setting the heavy glass mug on the counter with a thud that was quite loud in the quiet house, she sighed in contentment this time. Making her way back down the hall to her bedroom, She didn't even realize she was counting steps until she reached 23 and was only halfway to her bedroom. She paused after taking one more short step. It was exactly 23 steps from the kitchen to her bedroom, yet she was just now reaching the bathroom, which was the halfway point. Her brow furrowed, and she looked behind her, curious more than afraid. She stood there for a second or two, scratching her cheek absent-mindedly. She couldn't explain it, not really, except that hallways did not double in length. She had just woken up, was still tired, and her mind was playing tricks on her. That was all. Still, a bit unnerved, she continued walking towards the light of her bedroom. She couldn't help but count the steps, and hitting 23, she stood in the doorway. She looked over her shoulder down the hallway behind her, and it seemed eerie. She had lived in this house her entire life and never felt afraid in it. Never afraid of it. Now she was. That hallway was longer. She knew it. She ignored it. Stepping into her bedroom, she closed the door, shutting away the long hallway. She stood, looking at her bedroom. Everything in place. The digital clock facing her bed, the bed itself, the closet, fan whirring silently. Nothing out of order, except she had to turn the light off and walk to her bed in the almost complete darkness. Which was fine. This was her house, and there was nothing here. That hallway, though. The hallway was fine. Everything was fine. She couldn't sleep with the lights on. She knew that for sure, no matter how hard she tried over the years. It never worked. Even covering her eyes with a blanket didn't work. Somehow her body knew the light was on and wouldn't sleep. She had to turn it off. So she just did it, reaching over to flick the switch, plunging the room into the dim red light. The only sound was the beating of her heart and the light rush of her breathing. She took one step, then another. 7. It was 7 steps from her door to the bed. 13, 14, 15. Now she was growing angry rather than scared. This was stupid. She made herself stop counting, taking another step. She didn't know which one this was, and her hand reaching out. Her body relaxed from the rising tension as her hand touched the soft fabric of her sheets. Her bed. Climbing in, she pulled the comforter over her body, up to her chin. It was nice and cool under the blanket, making her smile. A deep wave of tiredness washed over her, making her eyes heavy. The odd number of steps she had taken faded from her mind as she glanced at the digital clock. 11:55 p.m. Strange. She had thought that... Whatever she had been thinking faded away as sleep overtook her. She awoke with a start, her eyes darting to the digital clock sitting on the nightstand next to her bed. 11:55 p.m. The bright red glow of the segmented numbers read, offering the only source of light in the dark room.